While some panelists might just take a minute to pull up the meeting minutes, I'd like to officially call this meeting to order at 6:10 p.m. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Emily Davis. I'm the current panel chair here from Epsilon Spires. I'm going to try to speak as clearly as possible. I'm in a room with echo and I have my mask on. So if you can't hear me, just let me know and I'll try to be clear. First, we'll just run through quick panel introductions. So we'll start with typically Madeline Arms, but she's on vacation this evening. So I'll start with you from the top. Chris Campany?
Here.
Sarah Coffey?
I'm here.
Hi, Sarah. Chris Coppolino?
I'm here.
Okay.
Hey, Emily, just a quick question. Is somebody unmuted and doing construction?
I don't hear anyone. No. We're having some projector issues here at Epsilon Spire, so you might be hearing Tony trying to get that back up and running. It's the only thing I can think of. Emily Davis, myself. Bill Irwin.
Yes, Emily, this is Bill Irwin here.
Hi, Bill.
Hi.
Bob Leach. No Bob this evening. Brett Long.
I'm here.
Hi, Bill. Mark McDonald. Paul Mark. No Mark or Paul. David Pearson.
Here.
Hi, David. Marvin Resnikov.
Marvin said he was joining at 7 p.m. He sent Tony and I an email.
Great. So we'll see Marvin then. Thank you, Lissa. Laura Sibilia, I think won't be able to make it this evening. June Tierney.
I'm here.
Hello. And Josh Unruh.
Here.
Hi, Josh. And Melissa Wyman.
Here. And Emily, I just want to point out that Paul Mark, the representative ostensibly from Massachusetts, I looked him up and on his official website, he says he's formerly an NDCAP representative. So I don't know what's going on with that, but I just thought I'd report that I found that information and it doesn't appear as if he's ever planning to attend.
Okay. Thank you for that, Lissa. Anne, do you have something to add about that? And you're muted.
He stepped down over 2 years ago, and we have asked, we being me and other people here in Massachusetts, as well as I remember June going to the governor, we've asked through state reps and the governor's office directly for a new appointment, and nothing has happened. I'm going to keep trying.
I have no doubt about that, Anne. Thank you. And I duly noted. I think we'll update our list and we'll change that. So thank you. Okay, panelists. Then we'll move right along to review and approval of the September 20th minutes. Do we have, Alyssa? Do you feel like you're comfortable and able to vote on the minutes right now, or should we wait until we have quorum at the next meeting?
I'll just abstain if those other panelists want to move forward. I just wasn't able to review them. I didn't look any further than the materials for this meeting for some reason, so okay. I apologize.
Well, you know, with Chris and June here, we actually have quorum even with your abstention, so I think we'll move ahead. Any additions or edits to the minutes, panel?
Yes, I have a couple of things that I caught on page 4 of the minutes at line 8. That there is a statement by and 8 to 1 in a previous meeting. that should read by an AN 821 vote. So we have a minor correction there. And on page 5, line 16, storage at power plant should read power plants, plural. And let's see, what else did I capture? There was one more item. Yes. And up on page 10, the last page of the minutes, on line 28 and line 40, it was referenced that the next panel meeting is December 7th, when in fact it was December 6th, which is today. So I would ask that we change that to December 6th in those two places.
Great. I would also like to add a substantive change on page 6, lines 12 through 13. It said that Emily Davis had added a potential item for support regarding the potential advisory committee that was related to the Blue Ribbon Commission. I think in that section of the meeting, I was not proposing a potential item for support, but rather I was asking about how federal policy impacts the work of NDCAP and Vermont Yankee decommissioning. And then Lissa and I had a conversation about that, and Lissa had commented that as long as there's no agency empowered to do this work, then there's continued inaction. So I could maybe add those substantive edits to.
Yeah, I'm fine with that as long as the panel is. So.
Okay. Any other edits or substantive changes, panelists? Lissa, is that a stale hand?
It's stale, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm just reading through the minutes. Sorry.
No worries. Then do I hear a motion to approve these changes?
So moved, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Seconded, June.
Thank you, June. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? I think no nays. Any abstentions?
I abstain, Lissa Weinman.
Thank you, Lissa. Then I believe we just approved our minutes. Thank you, everybody. So now we'll move along to the next item on the agenda, which is just to very quickly review the panel charge and purpose. And then I'd like to just roll this right into a discussion. We're picking up the discussion of the panel budget that we had last meeting on September 20th. It also sounds like someone might be unmuted. I think, Deb Katz, if you're able to mute your line, please. We're just getting a little bit of sound. So panelists, were you able to see the notes that was posted onto the NDCAP website, or should I send it again in the chat? I'm happy to do that. Is everyone able to see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So if it's possible, yes, thank you, Tony. I'm not sure if this panel is ready for a vote on the budget right now, but I think it would be a worthwhile conversation to have, at least to bring it to its next iteration, to finalize the budget. And I thought it would be helpful just to include the language of the NDCAP panel's charge and charter and duties. From again, these are materials that are on the website. It's the 2016 NDCAP charter, and then language from our statute on the duties. Because I think that this will naturally unfold the discussion of the budget will naturally unfold to items about the adequacy of our public participation and if more resources should be devoted to public participation and other related items for panel education and bringing in guest speakers during the meeting and those sorts of items. So I'm happy to walk through this, but I also hope that I made these notes clear enough that we can just hop right into a discussion. So maybe I'll just pause right here and see if there are any panelist questions on these materials or initial thoughts. Okay, yep. Oh, Sarah, go ahead.
I have a thought, but it's very specific about the budget. Do you want to hold off on?
I see Chris's hand is raised also. Maybe Chris, do you have a comment on the charter and then we'll go to Sarah's question on the budget?
No, I guess I was just going to ask, is there concern about adopting a budget tonight or? I'm fine either way. I just was wondering.
I would defer to what the panel desires on that. I think that the sooner that we know how we want to use these resources, the sooner we can enact on them. But if the panel is not ready for that, I don't want to rush anything that's premature. Does that make sense? Do you have any thoughts about that, Chris?
If you've developed it as chair in consultation with the person who ultimately has to manage the budget with, which is the Secretary of, Commissioner of Public Service, if you have a proposal that you feel is ready for us to vote on, I'm fine with voting on it.
There are a few. I'd be curious, just in terms of process, the level of specificity that the Commissioner of Public Service needs on that. Hi, June. And I do have some questions about how specific those items need to be and how much discretion the panel will have in the future for making some choices. You know, if something is public participation, how specific do some of those line items need to be? If they can be pretty broad, then I think that we could it would be great if we can have a vote. And if the DPS needs something that's more specific, then I think the panel has some more work to do.
Did you want me to speak to that, Madam Chair?
That would be great, June.
Excellent. So I would look at it a different way. The budget and specificity are more directed at helping the panel decide how it wants to use the resources. I do not require any specificity. I just would ask that the panel make an informed decision. And I think, Emily, you've done a lot of work with folks to shape up a budget. And when it comes time to pay pay invoices, that's where specificity comes in for the department. And I would fully expect that the expenses incurred will be properly documented. And I imagine that, if those invoices are consistent with the general outlines of what the panel has voted on, that should be more than enough specificity. So it's really more about this panel and how it wants to manage the money available to it, and less about what I need for this to move forward tonight.
Thank you, June. Anything else, Chris? Otherwise, we'll move to Sarah.
Is my answer the only? I see there's a decision. I guess you're asking us to make about Zoom versus Teams. The Climate Council went through this too. Just from my perspective, having used a bunch of different platforms, if you're taking comments on this now, if you want, I can wait.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Generally speaking, I find that there's varying functionalities with Teams depending on how you're accessing it. So like I have to access it through Microsoft Edge. So I don't necessarily have all the functionality of somebody who's actually using the Teams app. And then we've had other issues like people accessing it using a Mac versus a PC and others. the Climate Council went to Zoom just because it seemed to be the more easily accessible platform, and from, I guess, a participation equity standpoint, it just seemed to be everybody was kind of on the same playing field. But I mean, I can go either way, but that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I think participation equity seems like that's an important kind of concept for this panel. I'll turn to Sarah, and then Lissa, you have your hand raised briefly, and then June, I also see you in queue. So Sarah?
Great, thank you, Emily. So I had one question, and then I had a couple questions. One thing that I noticed that was different in this budget was that panelist per diem, those of us who don't work for state government, doesn't seem to be covered by this budget now. And that's one thing. I guess I thought that was something that would be covered by the budget, because otherwise, in statute, the citizen appointed panelists are entitled to a per diem every meeting. And that was in the last budget. So that was my first question. And then my second question had to do with the website, because I noticed, we had some discussion of this in September, and I saw that was reflected in the minutes, a discussion about what format the website could be, and understanding that the Department of Public Service needs to be the host of that. And I know that I understand that the Climate Council went through something similar, where it was hosted by, I believe it was the Agency of Natural Resources, and then there was an independent website. So I'm just wondering if anyone has more information on that, if that's a model that we might consider looking at for improving NDCAP's website usability and user friendliness, since the main part of our charge is to be a conduit for public knowledge, engagement, and education. So those are my two questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. I'll respond to the first one. The per diem still, I would stand. It's my understanding that this budget that we're working from now will not cover those kinds of costs, similar to like administrative time with the Department of Public Service. Like, there are some expenses which don't need to be reimbursed by NorthStar, which is sort of this budget that we're looking at right here. The $50 per diem will still exist, as you appropriately and accurately said, as in our statute. It's that, and it's collected under 30 VSA section 22. So that the availability of the panelists per diem would not change, but it wouldn't necessarily come from these funds, as is proposed right now. I don't know if it's appropriate to change that. I would probably wonder what June would have to say. But about the website, I think that June's going to be able to inform the next step on the website. So I hate to put you in the hot seat, June, again, but what do you think?
I'm not at all in the hot seat, and Lissa, you are going to be next, so just wanted to check in whether you're on these topics or something else. Sorry, you're on mute.
Muted, Lissa.
No, I just had a question about the budget. Now you're muted, June.
Thank you. I'm still recovering from the Climate Council, so I'm a little slow on the uptake tonight.
Oh, God.
So I think this Climate Council has been a wonderful experience in that it's helped change a couple of things that were constraining us previously when it came to what kind of platform we can use. So to go to Chris's point, if the Climate Council can use Zoom, I don't see why we can't use Zoom. We just have to figure it out. And also this panel needs to decide which functionality it prefers. And then we'll chase that down at the state level. On the website, Sarah, I think you're absolutely right. With the good news is that the Climate Council does have a webpage that's hosted by A&R. Looking at it, it does conform in style to the state conventions, which is what I've been saying. This is a state website, but I'm happy for us to look into what it is that the Climate Council is doing in controlling the content. I would point out that the Climate Council has a full-time director who was hired for this very purpose and others. And so there's a lack of symmetry there with our example. I think the most important thing at this point is that this panel decide what subgroup of panel members is going to work in a focused way on the website, because you're absolutely right, Sarah, that's a critical tool. We've said this for some time now, and very important for outreach. And when we have that brain trust from the panel, so to speak, then we can take these next steps in state government and figuring out, where this thing, what this thing's going to have by way of content, and how we're going to manage the process of getting that content put in and kept fresh. So those are my thoughts on that point. And lastly, on per diem, very respectfully, Madam Chair, I was not aware that per diem would not be paid out of this funds, because the idea was for NorthStar to be bearing the costs of a panel that exists primarily to deal with issues on their property. So if you have greater knowledge, which you may well have, let's talk about that. But otherwise, I would suggest that that's an item that ought to be restored in the budget.
Okay. I do not have greater knowledge.
Well, I'm sorry, that wasn't the right construct to use. What I meant to say is you may have researched it and know something that I don't know, because I will freely admit that I've been a little preoccupied with other matters lately. Not that NDCAP isn't near and dear to my heart.
No, of course. No, I was looking at this section of the statute. What is it?
You're probably looking at the bill back provisions, and this may be something to straighten out offline, unless there's a general consensus that these per diems are to be covered through the budget. So
okay.
Since I raised this question, I just want to say I would like to see it covered, because I remember the commissioner, saying that the whole point of getting this funding is to bear the costs of this panel, and I consider that one of the costs. So I think we all consider that one of the costs. So
I agree. Thank you, sir. And also, I just as a public service announcement here, for the folks on the panel who are entitled to that per diem, I hope you've been collecting it, and if not, I would urge you to do so. Because you're entitled to it, and if you're having any trouble accessing it through my office, please let me know.
Okay. So I'm making a list of edits and changes on this budget and adding to it right now that this will include analyst per diem as an item. Are we going to stick to the $50 per diem as originally in the statute, or should this change?
No, that's something that's statutorily fixed, so that's not within our discretion in my judgment.
Okay. Good. Lisa, anything else on the budget?
I was just curious about how, the mechanism for approving expenditures is there. I know that we talked about having a committee, but one of the things that I'd mentioned to you was, Emily, was if I, for instance, wanted to participate in a conference and there was conference fees, what would be the procedure for me to, apply to be covered for my participation in said conference, or how would that be approved? What would be the mechanism for that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's going to lead to a rich discussion. Right now, and kind of as a threshold matter, there's the first decision to make, which is our conference fees and expenses for individual panelists part of the budget. As proposed in these notes for this evening, that what has been called conference fees has now changed to speaker fees, with the idea that if individual panelists are going to pursue some kind of education, the entire panel should benefit from that. So instead of sending individual panelists out to a conference, the idea would be to procure those experts at that conference and see if we can pay them to come and present to the full panel. So that's a shift in idea, which is different than I think what you're proposing right now, which is, you know, the mechanisms for having your conference fees or an individual's conference fees covered. So I would sort of turn this back to the panel and ask, how does that sound? Do we want to retain some resources for sending a single panelist out to a conference, or should we just turn that entire pot of funds into speaker fees for the entire panel? Do you have thoughts on that, Lisa? Or, oh, you're muted.
I mean, I don't disagree necessarily with the concept of having people come, but I think it's just that's unreasonable and an expectation that couldn't be really met. And I, you know, honestly, there was a conference I would have liked to have attended, and I think, but it's passed now. But there may be others. I do see value in attending, just in terms of the networking and the kind of information that you get from physically being, and you know, with a whole variety of people at a conference like that. I'm particularly interested in what other host communities are doing, and, you know, being able to sort of learn from each other as we move forward. But, you know, I don't have any hard and fast ideas about conferences that I'm burning with desire to attend. I just think that the learning curve is steep on many of these matters, and there are a lot of industry conferences that occur that I think I would benefit from and be able to bring that benefit back to the panel potentially. And I was just curious about the mechanism, but I do think as you've laid it out, I don't think that's really practical. I mean, obviously you could get one or two speakers from a given conference that might be able to address a matter of concern like cask viability long-term or whatever, but I don't think there's any real substitute for any number of us actually attending a conference.
Noted. Thank you, Lisa. I saw Chris's hand kind of go up and then come down. I don't, it's like hand whack-a-mole, because I don't know if you have anything to offer. If not, Sarah, do you have your hand raised too?
Just historically, that's to my knowledge, the only time that any member of the panel has been reimbursed for travel or conference or anything was when the chair was actually invited to come speak on behalf of the panel. That wasn't me. That was back in the days of oh Lord, my brain is tired. My predecessor.
Kate.
What's that?
Kate O'Connor.
Kate, of course, yes. I apologize to Kate. But like anytime I went to, I had to attend, you know, like the nuclear decommissioning group or other groups. I was compensated as a panelist or anything. It's not sour grapes or anything. I'm just saying. I think typically it's just been reserved for when the chair is going to represent the panel someplace and speak on behalf of the panel.
Sarah, do you have anything to offer or to add to that? Sarah, I don't know if you're talking, but if you are, you're muted. I can't see your little square.
Yeah, Sarah, if you're speaking, you're muted.
Well, then maybe June, I see you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just try to channel some element of the panel in case there are folks who subscribe to this view. There are limited resources here. We have more resources than we used to have, but they are still limited. And as Sarah has pointed out with the website, one of the principal purposes of this panel is public education. And so I have to think that education that benefits an individual panel member is education that would benefit the public at large, which is, I think, the principal reason for supporting the position that you've been taking, Madam Chair, that the resources really ought to be devoted to bringing people in so that that education can be recorded and is available for many others besides the panel members. So that's just the view that I wanted to put out there for the sake of discussion, because I think it's important that the panel come to an agreement as to how it sees the issue. And this is the kind of thing where I, as commissioner, feel somewhat removed from the discussion. And happily, I see Sarah back, and maybe we can now hear from her. Oh, she's disappeared again. She's somewhere in there. So.
I'm happy to speak if I'm recognized by the chair. Sorry, I had a call that I had to pick up.
Of course.
It's one of those evenings where we're triple booked. I was able to listen in on some of the discussion. I think when I look at what our charge is as a panel, I think that we are really truly a conduit for, sharing information with the public. And as much as I would love to attend conferences, and I really do think that money, which is not really, it's not a lot of money, which should be used to inform all of us and to since we record these on BCTV, that it can be a really fantastic opportunity to share that with the public. So that would be, while I'm not opposed to people going to these things, I think we have to think about these as in that way. That's my feeling about it.
What is the current budget right now? I mean, that the expenditures totaling?
This would be for $35,000.
But I'm saying that the budget numbers that you've presented don't seem to add up to $35,000.
No, they don't. And that is, I mean, these are my kind of, back of the napkin estimates of what I think that these should be. And it shows that there is a lot of, I think, room for different ideas.
Right. Well, that was the point that I was just going to make, is that, yes, there are limited resources, but in this case, there are more resources than we're actually even proposing to spend. So, I mean, if there, again, I'm really not trying to, I don't want to go to any certain conference right now, but I could see scenarios in the future, particularly if we're, talking about increased federal activity on the issue of what happens to the spent nuclear fuel and completing decommissioning. All of that is building now in Washington, and host communities are getting involved, and there's new kinds of compensation agreements that are going on with local communities. There's a lot to keep on top of, and I just don't, I guess I'm wondering how the educational function is going to occur to the public if panel members themselves aren't spending the time necessary or taking the steps necessary to educate ourselves as panel members. So again, I'm just putting it out there because, I look at this issue closely, and there's so much that I'd like to do and I can't do. And, in terms of public participation, how to engage the public on these matters of decommissioning, it's a tough sell. I mean, look at what happened at our meeting today. It took us a long time just to get together to get the meeting started. I'm wondering, maybe it makes sense to have a local coordinator hired. Other panels like this have the whole state nuclear engineer's salary covered by the company. And we have our state nuclear engineer spending lots of time and hours trying to put these meetings together, when maybe we should be hiring someone locally who can, put a meeting together like this, and that's their only job. So, that might avoid some problems in the future and free Tony up to be doing more substantive work, which I'm sure he has. So I just bring these up. I'm going to remain silent now on the matter, but I do think, we shouldn't be holding back. We have $35,000 to spend, and we should be creative in terms of how we wish to do it to achieve the NDCAP's goals.
So Tony, you've had your hand raised for a little while. I want to recognize you, and then we'll go to Corey next.
Yeah, I'm going to take my mask off because I'm far away from people here, but I think it will make it easier for people to hear what I'm saying. Just to fill in a little bit, just to give you an idea where the expense approval process is right now. This is something, right now I approve expenses for meeting rooms, so on and so forth, per diems when they're submitted, so on and so forth. So initially the approvals come to me, whether we want to adopt that same process for, for some of the expenditures that were proposed this evening is really up to the panel to decide. To echo a little bit the point that Chris Campany made a while ago, as far as expenditures in the past for the panel, panel members to attend a meeting, the only approvals I'm aware of, and this dates back to the Shumlin administration, but there were a couple of instances where Kate O'Connor, as panel chair, was invited to speak at, I can think of 2 meetings in particular. One was a Nuclear Regulatory Commission meeting on decommissioning, and she was asked to speak to give a citizens advisory panel perspective on decommissioning in general. And then there was also another decommissioning conference that both she and I and Commissioner Recchia at the time were invited to be speakers, and that was something that the commissioner felt that the panel chair's expenses for that travel should be covered. But I always took that as being, well, that was a one-time decision from the commissioner's office. So right now I would say that, routine approvals would come through me. They would get, any expense that I approve. One, I review it, and then it is also approved, reviewed and approved by the Public Service Department's Division of Administration. But for anything out of the ordinary, like what has been discussed tonight, that would be something that I would want to consult directly with the Commissioner's office. That's where we are right now.
So we'll turn to you, Corey, or Josh, or.
Hey, Emily, it's Josh. So I just kind of wanted to start at the top with this budget based on our last meeting. When we talked about the website, fairly lengthy conversation about that. And I kind of remember, June, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you were, Department of Public Services in charge of the website, that funds not necessarily from this particular budget should be used to make improvements on it. I think that was your stance at the last meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, Josh, I think that's correct. The issue is that what is proposed here is possibly contracting for other services. And I'm guessing that is like design or style of content, how to write it in a manner that is, comprehensible given the technical nature of what we're doing here. I don't know. I'm speculating. And all I'm saying, excuse me, all I'm saying is that, for the parameters of the website and making sure that the content is appropriate for a state website and that it is refreshed and kept current and the like. Those are things that I would expect that would be done through state government as a matter of course. And the issue is whether there's supplemental work that this panel wants to pursue that would, inform what is ultimately handed off to the Department of Public Service to make sure is on the website, again, that is screened for conformity with state rules and the like. So, it's a decision that the panel needs to make about whether to spend this kind of money on it or not. But the bottom line is, if we didn't vote to spend any money on enhancing content, if you will, the basics of having a website, maintaining it and the like is what would be done as a matter of course through state government. It does not require expenditure. Like, I would not charge back my staff's time or seek to have the Agency of Commerce and Community Development get their staff time paid back for doing that kind of website management and content design and the like. And before we go to whether to spend money of this nature on that, I think it's imperative that this panel have some sort of working group or brain trust that is addressing that kind of question.
So essentially, the idea is if the panel wants to redesign it in some way, we bring that design or content for your approval, and whatever we pay the consultant to do that is what we're calling for out of this budget. You
got it. Yes,
okay.
That was a much clearer way of saying what I just said.
Gotcha. Okay. The second item, the BCTV meeting broadcast, is that just kind of a guesstimate of what additional expenses might be because of going to Zoom, or are we moving that out of the current budget into this budget?
I think it's a little bit more of the latter, and I'm glad that you raised this, because I think the conversation about Zoom versus Teams is really, I kind of wanted to double check that Zoom would be a preferable platform. I think I'm hearing that it is. Tony and I have already met with BCTV, and we have lined up we couldn't quite swing it to have this meeting run on Zoom. It's on Teams, but we are lined up for the next meeting to be on Zoom, and then we'll just have BCTV run and host the entirety of the meeting. So to your earlier point, Lisa, this does free up some of Tony's time day of doing the administration of the meeting itself. And I think it's going to be a little bit more of a seamless platform. So to actually answer your question, Josh, this is something that's in here as being a panel expense, but it's a little bit more firmed up than some of these other items. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. And then as far as the third item goes, and I won't get into 4 and 5 because we're not there yet, but I kind of agree with what everybody else is alluding to or saying, that, if we spend money for a speaker or something like that, it should be for the benefit of the full panel. I find it, difficult for a singular member to be able to bring it back, just like it's hard for you to understand something that you're not there face to face understanding it. We would have that same lost in translation coming from a single panel member back to the full panel, in my opinion. And I think there's enough people out there and that we could all benefit from whomever we have come speak with us. So.
Thank you, Josh. What I'm wondering if it makes sense from a process perspective, and I'm keeping an eye on time and I'd like to move things along, but I don't want to rush this conversation. I'm wondering if it makes sense to have some larger kind of pots of funds available for this, but maybe this conversation should move towards, I think, one of your earlier concerns or ideas, Lisa, about identifying. I'm just going to take off this mask just so it's clear. I hope that that's a little bit better. Okay, there's nobody around me. I'm wondering if it makes sense at this point to think about what are the procedures that these expenses get approved by the panel, rather than trying to specify what the costs are going to be right now and to come to agreement on them. So maybe we can have these big kind of broad stroke ideas about what would be an appropriate amount of expenditure for a year for the website expenses, for example. Maybe a better example is for speaker fees or panel education. And then figure out what's going to make sense in future panel meetings that we can all come to consensus around whether that's an appropriate expense. Is that clear? So what I'm proposing now is, instead of trying to develop the budget itself, is to agree upon a process by which this panel can agree to future expenses as they arise or as we think of them. Does that seem like, I'd be curious to hear reactions or responses to that. Melissa, is that an old hand, stale hand?
No, I'd say I agree with what you just said, but I also want to point out that if you're going to initiate a Zoom account, I've been currently paying about $150 a month for a conference Zoom. So that would also be an additional budget item. If NDCAP were to have its own Zoom capability, there is a monthly fee, and it adds up over the year.
Thank you for that. It's my understanding that it's going to just be on BCTV's account that they would be hosting it. So we wouldn't actually have our own Zoom account.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. June?
So, Emily, that to me sounded like a governance proposal. And I don't want to take a position on that either way. I think other panel members should speak to it. But I would suggest this. Tony gave you a very accurate description of how invoice payment follows in the agency. And I think under the statute, there's if I'm not mistaken, I ultimately have to make the decision about the expenditures. And I am saying to this panel that I'm prepared to be guided by the budget that you folks vote on. So I don't know whether you're proposing that in addition to that, the panel would be voting on individual expenses or categories of expenses that it's prepared to see its resources spent on. If that's your proposal, I would, in a friendly way, suggest that it's enough to get a budget passed that has, as we said, description of what you want to spend it on. And then you've got this other conversation that I'm just going to loosely tee up as Alyssa's proposal that money be spent on sending individual members to conferences, with the understanding that they would come back and teach the panel, if you will, about what they learned. And the other sensibility that, no, the money really ought to be spent on bringing in resources that educate everybody. And that's a conversation that's worth having and resolving. I just think it's different from the budget management question that we've been wrestling with here, that I think has an elegant solution, which is propose a budget and we vote on it. And then I just had one final point, which is why my hand was up, which was just to point out that it's fair enough to say that there appears to be money left over. And Josh very wisely, I think, did not go down the list of the agenda to 4 and 5. But the next item on that budget agenda is public outreach. And it could well be that we'd like to spend some significant resources doing some market surveying or the like to understand what it is that the public, needs or wants to hear from this panel and how it would like to interface. And that's going to cost money, at which point we may not have an overage after all. It's just a point I wanted to make, and I apologize if I'm being too prolific here.
Nope, you're not. It's very appreciated. Thank you, June. Sarah, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was thinking we should come together with a budget at the next meeting, have a real clear, succinct budget and put it before the panel and vote on it one way or the other. And then the policies or processes behind them. I personally would like to keep things as simple as possible so that we're not spending our time figuring out a process for how to spend it. But there are a few things that we need to make sure we're clear about. I think there's only one area specifically, or maybe two, but so I would just say, I think this is really helpful, the way that you've put this together, for the discussion this evening. And if you think you have enough input from us to kind of take the next step, I would propose that we, at our next meeting, have something that we can vote on.
I feel mostly clear. I feel like this, I'm wondering if the panel agrees that we should probably clear up this matter of speaker fees versus conference fees, or whether panel education will include conference fees. I think I hear a consensus, but I'd like to be clear about that. And then I'd also like to know more about what the panel thinks about its current outreach to the public, which comes, there is a full accounting. Thank you, Tony, for helping me get this accounting of what does NDCAP communication currently look like, and that's on page 4 of the notes. And so you can see mostly it's meeting notices, and meeting notices through a press release list and a public interest contact list. And then, of course, the website posts. So going back to June's idea, there could be more potentially in this area for market surveys to identify what needs there are, or social media posts or the like. So I do just kind of, I would like to get a little bit more panel input and maybe consensus on those 2 areas. And then, Sarah, was your suggestion to actually vote on this in our next meeting, which would be in the spring? Not this evening? Oh, you're muted, Sarah. Still muted.
Yeah, Sarah, you're still muted.
Sorry, when Tony had the document up, it closed off on my screen how I could unmute myself. So sorry about that. If you feel like you can put it together really quickly what the budget is, I just don't see a budget before us yet. I see items and they don't add up to the 35. So if we could do that quickly this meeting, great. But I would say there are other things that we have to do this evening too. So that's why I was suggesting the next meeting. The only thing that seems to me to be pressing is that we could approve like spending the money on the Zoom, like with BCTV. That sounded like that was something that would need to be decided. I don't need to be the arbiter of all of this. I just don't see that we have a budget format in front of us.
Okay, and yeah, I agree. I don't think that we can do that this evening, unless I hear from others that we could probably make some fast decisions. But I'm trying to read all your faces, and I'm not quite getting that. So, do we need actually, Tony, to have the panel approve the Zoom platform and the BCTV contract? Is my understanding that was largely administrative, but we could probably have a panel vote on it if you'd like.
That's a good question. In the past, I mean, we currently have a contract with BCTV that we are in the process of renewing. And the draft of the current renewal does include language that BCTV would run these webcasts, for example, and we have a fee for that. And then there's the base webcast and meeting recording fee as well, and also a potential rental of the large scale PA system that was necessary when we were meeting in larger rooms with 30 or so people in the meeting, and most of the panel members there. So I keep seeing June shaking her head on this. So I would say June likely has something to add to that.
Yeah, I think this is going sideways. That contract approval is my responsibility, and I think we should just leave it that way. So I think what we're getting out of this is a very clear signal that there are changes the panel would like. And Emily, you're bringing a rigor to something that we've never done before. So thank you, because don't forget this funding is new. But I really think broad brush strokes will take care of it. And I will be guided by that. And that's fine. But Sarah's made a good point. The budget so far doesn't fully add up. And I think that we may need to defer final action on the budget if that's important to the panel to spring. Another way we can handle it is we can, content ourselves with the guidance that is represented in what you have put down. And those are things that the panel can pursue in the interim until we can get together in March to vote on a budget would be my suggestion to you otherwise. But let's try to keep it simple and just realize that, at the end of the day, when it comes to cutting checks and so forth, that's going to rest on my head. And I also get the blame for what it's worth. So you folks may enjoy that. Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
No. So I just want to say, so let's just take Tony off the hook here, because Tony's my representative, but push come to shove, the responsibility rests with me.
Okay, then panel, does anyone disagree with that approach as June just described it? Otherwise, we'll pick up the conversation when we meet next, which might be in April or May. Okay.
I would also just like to say that just because we have a cap at $35,000 annually doesn't mean I'm advocating that we have to spend every penny of it. Just because you put together a preliminary budget that, I agree with the preliminary budget as you've presented it so far. And I just don't mean to insinuate that I think we should spend every cent if we don't have a good reason for spending it. So I just want to be clear about that point. I don't think the budget that we present has to add up to $35,000 a year. It has to reflect what we genuinely feel we need to do a good job on this panel.
Understood. Thank you, Lisa. Unless there's any more panel comments on this, then we'll move to public comments on panel charge, budget, logistics, and public participation. And Lisa and Sarah, I'm guessing those are stale hands, unless you have something else to add. Okay. Any public comments?
Yep.
Oh, Anne, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. This is my favorite topic, right? So I just want to say that I think it's important for the group to think about what the goals of public participation are before you start deciding how to spend money. And, yes, you're going to need a website and you might want to do a survey, but what are the goals? What do you think, what do you want to accomplish? Wouldn't it be great to have more than just us few diehards here every meeting? But why? What do you really want to accomplish with it?
Thank you, Anne. I agree. Any other public comments? Otherwise, we'll try to stay somewhat on track in terms of time, and then we'll move to the Federal Nuclear Waste Policy Committee update. Alyssa, are you prepared to start off the conversation, or would you like me to queue you up?
Sure, you would. Yeah, I'd love to see how you queue me up. Go on.
Oh, okay.
If you want me to, I can just go. It's brief.
No, I'm happy to. Also, just a little bit of context for anyone who's just kind of hearing about this committee for the first time, or maybe unfamiliar with our process. Almost 12 months ago, to date, this panel voted on the creation of this committee, which Lisa has generously volunteered and committed herself to chairing. It's called the Federal Nuclear Waste Policy Committee. And the charge of this committee was to study the issue of spent nuclear fuel and the national policy landscape around that, and with the intention potentially to draft an advisory opinion that this panel might consider endorsing, which would be a recommendation to, well, we would defer to the committee for that, but it could be either to the Vermont General Assembly or to the governor's office. So the group has been meeting monthly throughout the year, which is a big commitment, and had a lot of rich substantive conversations. And Lissa is now going to give us an update. So to you, Lissa.
Great, thank you, Emily. So we have been meeting monthly. We meet for a strict 1 hour monthly. Corey Daniels, Matty Arms, Marvin Resnikoff, myself, and Tony attend regularly. Emily sometimes comes in, and I would say that since we just got off a conversation about public participation, if you're looking to increase public participation and interest, this is the issue that does it. And it must be carefully considered, because I think one of the reasons that we wanted to spin off a committee like this is because we've been getting participation in those committee meetings from people all across the country, because this is kind of a hot button issue. It's only going to get hotter. Now that the Department of Energy has just several days ago put out a request for information from groups like ours and others for opinions about their process of consent-based siting, because they're trying to jumpstart what has been basically a moribund situation regarding nuclear waste management in this country. So the Biden administration has made it a priority. The Department of Energy is now asking for public input by March 4th of next year. They'd like to hear back from us, maybe, or from individuals on the panel about how should there be consent that's generated? What does consent mean when a community says, yes, we'd like a nuclear waste or facility, either permanent or interim? Does that mean that once you sign on the dotted line, that consent remains forever? Or what about if the governorship changes and the new governor doesn't want to give consent? So there's many issues just related to this concept of consent. And then again, they're looking for information on interim storage, the kind of storage that's being proposed by NorthStar and Holtec out in the Southwest, which we've heard a lot about, and which the governor of Texas, governor of New Mexico don't want. So regardless of whether the NRC grants a license, as they just did to the NorthStar affiliated group in West Texas, that's only one step in a very lengthy process regarding the siting where our spent nuclear fuel might eventually go. So it's a big issue. We've been meeting, we've been grappling. We did come up with some consensus within the group regarding, we agree as a group, all of us, that consent should be necessary before there is a nuclear waste facility of any type sited. So we went ahead and we drafted an advisory opinion regarding that, and also with input from Marvin Resnikoff. He also suggested that we look at what informed consent means, whether there are funds available to communities to get informed, just like we're talking about here. Sometimes, the industry comes in and they have a point of view and they have a lot of money at their disposal to create, educational materials or speakers in any given locality. But people who might have more questions don't have any funds to use to inform themselves necessarily. So there's questions about consent. And the long and the short of it is that we agreed at our last committee meeting that we would like to continue studying this matter. We think we've learned a lot, and we think that it's an important quest that we're on. We do have a draft opinion that we were not actually ready to be posted onto the committee website because we hadn't gotten ample feedback from all committee members. So that the advisory committee, the draft advisory opinion that you saw in the materials for tonight's meeting, in my opinion, was not ready for you for prime time. However, since you might have taken a look at it, you'll see that it proposes to concur with the Department of Energy and immediately trying to find a consensual approach of a place to put our spent nuclear fuel, our nuclear waste. And the advisory opinion has not been commented upon by Maddie and nor Corey that I can see on the document. So I'd invite any of the committee members to comment on it now if they'd like to. But I think what I would propose we do is to have our next meeting, which is in a couple of weeks in December, and hash out the advisory opinion while we're all together, and then present it to the panel to be potentially considered for the next meeting. So I want to say, though, that, there is a lot of impetus right now to move this policy. There's a lot of disagreements about what the law says. The law says you can't have a consolidated facility without a permanent facility being licensed and approved. We know the whole process is going to take many, many, many more years. Even if everything was approved tomorrow, it would still probably be anywhere from 10, even 20 years before we would see any of that material move. We did become aware that private companies like NorthStar might be trying to, some might say, circumvent the law or go around the law to be able to move waste from one of their own facilities to another facility that they own and just not even adhere to the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. There's a lot of questions with that. I don't know that's something that the panel wants to talk about. I will say that it was nearly unanimous vote last year that we should remove any support from any policy change until we understood the issue better. So I think, we are trying to understand the issue better. I think those of us who've been involved in the quest have learned a lot. There's still more to learn. And I would like to just ask people, we decided to meet quarterly for longer periods instead of monthly because the monthly arrangement wasn't really working very, very well, we thought. So we'd like to continue the work of the committee. We would like to come to a coherent advisory opinion that underscores this idea of consent, whether or not it includes nuclear facilities adhering to normal environmental protection standards or not is something we have not discussed. So I just wanted to let you know that there's also a Department of Energy consent-based siting webinar tomorrow at 2 p.m., which I will be participating in. I've signed up for it. If others want to, just go to DOE and you can also listen in at 2 p.m. tomorrow. But that's basically it in a nutshell. And I would like to invite other members of the committee to say something now, if they would, regarding the process or how they feel about it. I'm ready to keep going and I can do whatever I can. But I do see that there is a lot of public interest in this matter and that decommissioning is over when the spent nuclear fuel is gone, according to the NRC. So it fully falls within the confines of our public mandate, from what I can tell. And I think we should continue to discuss it.
Thank you, Liza. Any other members of the committee want to add anything to that? I guess it would be just Marvin or Corey.
If not, then I just want to make sure that I'm clear on the process moving forward and how you imagine the committee interacting with the panel. So hopefully, and this might be aspirational, but hopefully you will have deliberated on the advisory opinion that is in draft form right now, not ready for prime time. And that would happen at the end of December. And then the next time that the panel meets, you would have something to present to the panel. Is that correct? Oh, I believe I'm frozen.
I just got dropped from the internet. I think you're back.
I'm back. God, am I thawed? I think I thawed out.
Okay. And it also looks like Marvin is raising his hand in the picture, so I think he wants to say something.
Sure. Marvin, anything to add?
I think June also had her hand up.
No.
No, she says no. I just wanted to say a word about consent. This is not just an issue of Nevada or Texas or New Mexico. It's also a matter of Vermont. The Department of Energy is now looking for locations, going to reinstitute the process and start looking for locations around the country. Now, the issue is, does Vermont also want to have a say? If Vermont does not want this kind of facility, then Vermont should support the consent language, because Vermont should be able to say, well, we don't want the facility. So it's not just an issue of Nevada, it's also an issue of Vermont.
Yes.
Thank you, Marvin. Any panel comments? Oh yeah, Sarah, go ahead.
Thank you all for your work on this. And just to follow up on Marvin's comments, I believe my understanding that the town of Vernon passed a similar kind of resolution about consent-based siting. Is that correct? Yeah, I'm seeing nods. So I look forward to being able to discuss this more fully when you guys are ready. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're close. It's hard to get everybody together and, reading stuff. And so we're doing our best, but I do think that the idea, we are backing that idea of consent-based citing and following in Vernon's footsteps in that way. There are other points that we do tend to have some agreement about, and I'd like to explore those more within the committee. And again, our public participation has been high in these meetings. We have people from Department of Energy and others coming in routinely to listen in. And it was underscored by Mark Holt at the Congressional Research Service that the Congress and the administration is eager for feedback like this from groups like ours. So it's almost incumbent upon us, I think, to weigh in on some level, because it is affecting our potential our decommissioning, and we should talk about it. I also want to say, June, the Public Service Department and the PUC are still listed as members of the Nuclear Waste Strategy Coalition, which advocates for Yucca Mountain and consolidated interim storage and other things that we as a panel have said that we do not want to weigh in on at this time. And I know you had made a public statement that you would pull out, that you had been a member of that coalition because of Sarah Hoffman's leadership there. She's no longer a leader. And I do believe that there are also annual fees associated with being a member of that coalition. So I would urge the Department of Public Service to withdraw your name if that's what you intend to do, because you are in fact very publicly taking a policy position by being a member of that coalition.
Yeah, Lisa, I appreciate your pointing that out, though I would distinguish between the vote of this panel and what my department and the PUC do. they're two separate things. So I take your point, and I stand by my statement that the department does not intend to continue as a member of that organization, but it's not because of positions this panel takes. And I also think, to my knowledge, I have not paid the dues, so I don't know what's going on. But we can look into it. Just to be clear, this panel's positions are not Department of Public Service positions.
I appreciate that. I just know that if people go to that website and they see that the Department of Public Service of Vermont and the Public Utilities Commission are both members, people take that kind of, presence seriously on a public policy matter. So
Understood, but the reason why you want me to be clear about it is because you want to advance the position of the NDCAP. And what I'm saying is the NDCAP's position is not my state agency's position. It's not the PUC's position. I will look into it, but that's as far as this needs to go.
thank you. I appreciate that.
We'll turn to Chris, or unless Tony, do you want to speak on this?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add on this, Lissa had alerted me to this, and I took a quick look at the Nuclear Waste Strategy Coalition website. And from what I can tell, they haven't updated their website since about March or April or so. So it may just simply be that we're there by default because we paid last year's fee. Yeah, I don't know. But that's one possible explanation for this right now.
Chris?
I was just going to say, I hope that Department of Energy is not going to just throw out all the work that happened in 2016, because that'd be a damn shame. A lot of progress was made back then as far as input and basic standards and basic expectations. So anyway. For what it's worth, I'm just speaking to the universe. Just hope they don't take all that good work and throw it out.
And relatedly, Lissa, do you anticipate, and this might be premature, but do you think that part of your work in the committee or the committee's work is to submit comments to the DOE during this public comment period, or are you advising or you're advising NDCAP to make comments, or is this an advisory opinion maybe outside of that? I guess I'm wondering, how does this comment period and the committee's work interact?
I think that, this is all just the past couple days that I learned about this. I don't know when our next meeting. I don't think we've determined that yet for next year. But I would say that I think it would be important that the committee do weigh in on this and reiterate our support, or maybe even define our support for consent. And I think that is work that we can tackle within the committee. I'm just not clear about what the process is regarding an advisory opinion that could be submitted as DOE testimony even. Like what the time frame or the protocol is for us to, as a committee, approve it, send it on to the full panel. That can only be approved at our next meeting, right? It can't be done virtually, as far as I understand. So unless we meet before March 4th, then we would not be able to submit any testimony, except as individuals potentially, but not as a panel.
Okay, that's good to clarify and just be aware of the timing and all the pieces and everything. So thank you for that. Any more panel discussion of the Federal Nuclear Waste Policy Committee? Otherwise, we can also open this up to public Q&A on the committee. I don't see any more panelists, so members of the public, will turn to you. Go ahead, Anne.
I would agree with Lissa that this is something that could, nuclear power is hard for the public to understand and follow. It's very complex, but this is an issue that the federal policy level could resonate and is very important for people to know about, in my opinion. So I just want to reinforce what Lissa said. And I also, this is more kind of from previous conversation, but I was thinking about it and
She muted.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry. I was just going on and on about how that I agreed with Melissa, and that this is something that the public could get interested in. Some of the details of decommissioning are kind of arcane, and people get a little, bored with it. But and I also going back to what we were talking about before. For instance. A good survey of what's on people's minds should be done created with input from the public before you even get to asking the questions, getting to do the survey. Don't make it up out of your own minds. Talk to people, see what they're thinking, see what their questions are, and then ask them to help with analyzing the results. And also, make sure that you listen to what people say, and that you're responsive to it. That people will feel. Otherwise, why would people bother to participate? So I've done a lot of that kind of work in my career, and it does take time. It takes money, but the results are meaningful if you can take that time. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne. Deb Katz, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Unmuting is always complex somehow. So I want to, I think this issue of consent is really an essential issue in terms of dealing with toxics of any kind and what a community, what their position is. But it's also that the issue of consent is a complex issue, and who has to give consent is a complex issue. Is it just a town? Is it a county? Is it a region? Is it a state? Is it 3 states? Do you solicit communities to volunteer, or do you get driven by geology? And from geology, then reach out to communities that meet the geological standards that are necessary for deep geological burial? I mean, we have worked with experts in consent. CAN has done that, working with certain nuclear corporations. I would suggest actually bringing in some experts on consent for the whole NDCAP to hear the complexity of these issues. In Canada, they are asking communities to volunteer first and then determine whether they meet geological standards. But there are different ways to approach this, and it is really not easy. In fact, when we dealt with physicists and geologists on the issue of deep geological burial, they were most confounded by the issue of consent and were completely overwhelmed by what these experts were raising. So we have worked with experts on this, and this is really important. I would also point out that when the panel in 2016 had met on the issue of moving forward, whether with interim storage or deep geological burial, and the issue of consent had come up, what was raised was that it should not be the DOE to reach out on consent issues to communities, but in fact, it should be an independent process separate from the DOE. So the DOE itself, moving forward on this, is already a hodgepodge process, which was not what was envisioned in 2016. So thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Any other members of the public? Otherwise, I think we'll move along with our agenda. Move on then.
Do you take public comments from the people that just showed up like me?
We actually are just moving right into the portion of the meeting, which is early general public comments. So if this would be entirely appropriate, I'm sorry, you'd have to remind us of your name.
Martha.
Martha.
Yeah. I'll take my mask off because I'm not too close, 6 feet away, you know. I studied science in high school and college. It's very complicated what we're trying to do to keep our Earth safe from the radioactive waste and to have a way to guard it and have a way that it'll decay without getting in the water table. And so let's keep on the track where we work together with the region and not just the one town or something. Common sense, you know, and have the scientists work with the governors and the county and regional people. Like Windham County is bigger than Brattleboro, so here we have the state scientists and we have maybe the experts that can decide, like the lady saying, look at the geology and see where you can most make the Earth safe from the long-term effects, and also take apart the isotopes or whatever you do. It's the wrong terminology, I don't remember how to say it. Even though I studied it, read Einstein and relativity and all that. I studied it enough to know there's a better way to do this than wait for 3 million years for it to decay on its own, to exaggerate, yeah. There's a better way to do this. And because we're taking care here in Vermont, we should take care to be kind to the people in Texas and Mexico so they don't have problems down the line for their water table and their children and their children's children. That's my thought on it.
Thank you, Martha.
And the environment itself, the way we have to look at the geology of where we're going to put the waste until we can get it totally harmless.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other public comments for those not able to stay to the end of the meeting? Deb, is that an old hand? Still a hand? I'm guessing it is. No. Would you like to add something else?
I'm mute.
Okay, thank you. Then we have built in a 5-minute break. We can do that break in transition unless you're all fired up and ready to go, and move right into the NorthStar update, and then we'll get into the other state agency reports. What do you think, panelists? Would you like a 5-minute break? Does that feel civil and humane?
Oh, I got my microphone. I'm sorry.
5-minute break? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes. I heard one yes. Okay, so we'll take a 5-minute break. And then
We'll be civil and humane.
We'll be civil and humane, and we'll turn to Corey Daniels. Okay. I think we're all mostly back. Corey, are you there and ready to go? Otherwise,
I'm here and ready to go.
Okay, great. Thank you, Corey. So at this point, we'll shift into both the NorthStar update on the VY site and the decommissioning activities, and then we'll move right into the state agency reports and updates. So without further ado, Corey, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Emily. And I'll just work with you, Tony, to advance the slides. I think that works probably about as good as anything.
Okay.
So, slide, please. All right, good evening. As usual, we'll start off our presentation with a pitch for safety. If this is your first time seeing a NorthStar presentation, our target 0 includes radiological, environmental, industrial, and nuclear safety. It's not just a slogan. We intend to do this job right and do it safe and do it once. Next slide, please. Along with that discussion on safety, we have gone now over 1.1 million person hours worked on site since we've taken ownership in 2019 without an OSHA lost time accident. So a pretty good safety record, and we look to continue to build upon that. From a regulatory standpoint, we've had no cited or non-cited violations to date as a licensee. Also a very impressive record, and we're working very hard to maintain that. As far as production goes, we remain acceptable. We're confident we will finish the decommissioning well ahead of the 2030 projected time date. The reactor project has gone a little longer than originally scheduled, but by all accounts, we recognize that that original schedule was very aggressive, and ultimately the bulk decommissioning work has not been impacted by critical path activities of the reactor removal. And so we'll continue to work around that as that finishes up. So that's our performance update. Next slide, please. This slide I put on a number of the presentations. It's just a macro of the large items required for a nuclear commercial facility decommissioning, the fuel management across the top. The site restoration and final surveying will happen throughout the decommissioning and finish up probably sometime in 26 before 2027 by our projections at this time. And then the large component removal and the dismantlement of all the buildings and structures on site are kind of delineated in the blocks and the line items below that. But overall, it just kind of shows the flow of the major activities and the ones that will continue on the spent fuel management piece until the Department of Energy meets their obligation or something happens with combined interim storage and we have the opportunity to remove the fuel from the site. And at that point, we'll be able to decommission the SFISI as well. Next slide, please. All right, and this slide is showing a cutaway view of our Mark I reactor. Along the bottom are the arrows that kind of describe working through that reactor disassembly and demolition. And it goes from the top down, and you can see pretty much everything is complete. At this point, we're in the demobilization effort. We're collecting all the garnet from the cutting operations, and we've started the drain down of the vessel, and we're prepping around the drywall area so we can cut the nozzles and be ready to start the vessel segmentation itself. Next slide. So with those reactor vessel operations and that media and garnet collection, we brought in some specialty equipment. A lot of that's a filtration system, allows us to vacuum up the water and remove all the granular material that we use in the high pressure cutting operations. And once we get that all cleaned up, we'll be able to finish the drain down. And that just shows the workers setting up and commissioning some of that equipment. Next slide, please. All right, on your left, photo showing what it looks like near the bottom of the vessel. And you can see the water's a little bit cloudy, and that's really due to the vacuuming operation that's ongoing at the time this photo was taken. But you get an idea how fine the garnet media is, and that's being cleaned up. And then this is a little dated from the photo previously shown. You can see the vessels in operation for removing the sediment, and then that's a shielded cask that we use to manage some of the filters that come out of the dryer separator bit, the reactor cavity area, and the spent fuel pool. Next slide, please. Again, another photo up on the refuel floor. You can see the gentleman in the basket over the dryer separator pit. They are performing some decon activities, high pressure washing of the walls as we lowered level. And then you see a little bigger view of the reactor cavity area. That's the round area in the back where it connects to the dryer separator pit. Next slide. And then some progress activities. That's the fixative being applied to prevent any loose surface contamination, which is fairly mild, but it still improves the working environment and the safety for the workers up on the refuel floor and prevents any airborne conditions from occurring. So we affix those walls and continue the drain down operations. And again, you can see the water in that area is a little bit cloudy, but the cleanup operation is ongoing. Next slide. So part of that cleanup, we install a turbidity curtain, allows us to discharge water that's been filtrated into a different area to improve the filtration process. And you can see the packaging of the small filter elements in the cask in preparation for shipment. So those activities are ongoing on the refill floor this time. Next slide. It's a picture of the spent fuel pool, kind of starting at the top center. You can see a large cylindrical white container that's actually a rack for holding filters. And then just to the right of that is actually what we call a Trinuke 260. It's actually a large vacuum filter system. Thank you, Tony. And then in the bottom right-hand corner is actually the basket that's holding the greater than class C waste. And then on the left-hand side, often in the corner, is actually one of the specialty cutting pieces of equipment. Actually, it's kind of a long piece just to the right of where your cursor is there, Tony. And then there's a couple of small support pieces of equipment on the floor in the pool. But you can see the pool is pretty empty and it's quite clean. For the most part, that's the way we keep it as a working volume for some of our underwater operations. Next slide, please. In our last presentation, we showed the preparations and the start of the administrative building superstructure demo. You can see that is all complete at this time. That large building is now completely gone. It's been removed off the side of the church building. Next slide. And like many of the physical structures, it was completely clean, free releasable. The materials have been segregated and much of it was able to be recycled. Next slide. The main condenser, probably the largest component in the facility, aside from the effort that goes into the reactor building for decommissioning. We've removed now over 2.5 million pounds of steel and materials from the main condenser. The structure of the main condenser frame we left up just for structural purposes in the term building, but it is effectively decommissioned at this point. And all the materials have pretty much been gathered up, packaged, and shipped to Texas. So the main condenser is gone. And I think the next slide, we get one more photo of the lower section that's almost looking upwards towards the same area where that other photo was just taken. But you can see the main condenser is gone, and now it looks like a large concrete vault, or the rooms. That's our heater bay. And like the rest of it, it's pretty much empty now. Next slide, please. So while the turbine building's finishing being cleaned out in preparation for ultimate demolition of the superstructure, what we call the red waste building, it's really where the water cleanup operations happened while the plant was in operation, and some of the materials are aggregated before they were shipped for many years. You can see a small square on the left-hand picture in the upper center with saw cut right out of the wall. You can actually see the block where it landed down on the pile of dirt beneath it. That was to allow access for equipment and materials to come out of that structure. And then in the picture on the right, the preparation, the roof membrane was removed and bagged up, and all those materials were taken away and disposed of as well. And that structure is currently under physical demolition with heavy machinery. Next slide. So that picture was taken about a week and a half ago. If I could show you what it looked like today, it's quite a bit further along than that already. But once we get it, it's kind of like painting or preparation for other significant work. There's a lot of prep work, but then once we turn the big machines on it, it goes pretty fast. And that building is being demolished pretty quickly. Next slide. And you can see no snow on the ground. Pretty nice day when this photo was taken about 2 weeks ago. But the material, and this is the east cooling tower basin, that has all been removed. And the east cooling tower basin is basically fully removed. There's no concrete left for that. It's all been aggregated and piled up, and the west cooling tower that had the large knee basin in it. We are working to remove the materials at least 4 feet below grade at this time. So both cooling towers are being prepared to be placed in the condition that will support a final status survey and release. Next slide. So while those activities are happening, we're still shipping waste regularly. This shows our radioactive waste container number hotel ready for rail transport, all prepped up and with the impact limiters on it, and that has all since been shipped to Texas. Next slide. And additionally, other materials as they're leaving for Texas. I know I've showed you guys a number of slides of train cars leaving the site, but that's a big part of what we do. And then the next slide will show you some numbers that reflect some of the progress on that. So we're still shipping about 3 rail cars a week, sometimes as many as 5, weather dependent. It'll slow down a little bit over the winter months, but we're well on track and to meet our goal of shipping 150 containers this year. And I think we may have already exceeded it at this point. And we're up to 356 shipments to date. And you can see we're coming up on almost 40 million pounds of materials and 28,000 carries worth of activity have made it to Texas safely. So quite a bit of materials left this site. Next slide. I apologize for the amount of words. I know folks don't always appreciate having a slide read to them, but for the non-RAD characterization and remediation efforts, it's a very good story to tell, and I'm sure the state agencies will have their own reports to provide. But ultimately, our risk evaluation report was approved in the first part of November. We continue to perform sampling with our state agency overseeing with their contracted group, now known as Atlas. And I believe the next round of sample collection is scheduled for 12/14. We have removed a number of wells that are no longer required to be in the program, as were formerly abandoned with permission and approvals from the state. And we've continued to do some of the small excavations. We cleaned up the 3 remedial actions near the cooling towers. Area of concern number 3 were just soil piles. Those were removed. And we have a couple other small areas that we are ready to perform shallow, what we call a dig and haul, the removal of materials. And then we'll obviously sample and do confirmatory samples of the sidewalls and check to see that we got all the materials out. And so those are going as planned. And we continue to collaborate with the state agencies on our bi-weekly calls. We had one this morning, and we had the agencies here for a tour on December 1st as well. We got to meet Grant Bradley, who will be replacing Gerald Noyes. And we'll get Kevin Burke to the site when he's able to join us again. But overall, the non-radiological characterization remediation is going as planned. We're not finding any surprises. As expected, the site is very clean. It was previously an agricultural property, and with the activities that happened with the power plant through the years, and we believe the decommissioning and the cleanup will be well managed and easy to demonstrate that we'll have a clean site when we're done with the work here. Next slide. And again, I'll close out with our reminder that we are working to achieve target 0. And that's a picture of us actually setting one of the lids onto one of the red waste containers in the spent fuel pool prior to it being lifted up and removed from the pool. And that's all the material I have for the presentation. Pending any questions.
I can't tell if there are any panel questions right now, but I think what we'll do is, unless there are any burning questions, run through the other state agency reports, and then we'll do a panel Q&A at the end. So first, let's turn to the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. We have that queued up. Trish Capolino. Oh, sorry, Gerald Noyes. I'm sorry, Trish, I have you, the state rep. Gerald? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Good evening. My name is Gerald Noyes, and I'm working with the Department of Environmental Conservation, Waste Management, and Prevention Division. And I'm going to go over some of what the DEC's work is in working with NorthStar and oversight. Next slide, please, Tony. Can people hear me like this, or should I put on a microphone? Okay, you're nodding your head. All right. Next slide. The DEC work, one of our jobs is to ensure the adherence to the memorandum of understanding between NorthStar and the state. We're doing that through ongoing meetings, site visits. There's environmental sampling done by Haley and Aldrich on behalf of NorthStar. And then the state has a technical contractor, ATC, and now they're Atlas Engineering. And they do split sampling. They help us with a report review, work plan review, and the state also is issuing permits and doing permit reviews. Next slides, please. The big part of this is the ongoing environmental sampling. There is Haley and Aldrich has quarterly groundwater sampling that's required by the memorandum of understanding. The next sample event is scheduled for the week of the 14th, and the state will have its technical support contractor out there doing split sampling, meaning they're going to take some samples also and send those to another lab to verify that basically the labs agree on what's being measured and that we agree with what Haley and Aldrich is reporting. To date, the environmental sampling, this is the non-radiological environmental sampling, has not shown any area-wide groundwater contamination. The split samples verify what Haley and Aldrich are reporting. Next slide, please. There are extraction wells that have been pumping groundwater in an attempt to prevent water from getting into the basement. That was done under permit, and that has been sampled and shown that it was clean, so it was discharged to the Connecticut River as permitted. The sampling continues, and that is performed prior to discharge. And we're coming up on, I think, the first soil sampling that will be done. NorthStar is required to sample ground under buildings as they get removed. So now that the concrete is being removed from the first cooling tower, we're going to get the chance to sample underneath that, because they've done a lot of sampling on site over the past couple of years to determine if there is widespread environmental contamination. They haven't found any, but there's always been the possibility that there's something underneath the buildings, under the structures. So this December, they're going to start with sampling soil under the cooling tower, and that will be done at the same time that groundwater is being sampled. And again, there will be split samples from ATC Atlas. Next slide, please. As Corey said, the DEC and the Vermont Department of Health reviewed and approved the non-radiological data evaluation report. There was the potable water system was modified basically because they wanted to tear down the admin building. So that had to be moved, but since that was a permitted water system, that water system permit had to be changed, and that's been approved, and the water system has been moved. A construction permit was issued for some of the demolition work. Haley and Aldrich is in the process of drafting a stream alteration permit for the cooling water intake and exit structures. And because that works on the bank of the Connecticut River, permits are required from both the DEC and the Army Corps of Engineers. So DEC will be reviewing those the state permit once it comes in. Next slide, please. Okay, in ongoing work, they've been clearing the buildings. That's the big thing that they do. They clear the buildings before they get torn down. So asbestos abatement is largely complete, although Atlas ATC did do some inspections when there was more asbestos work being done. They didn't find any significant anomalies during site visits, and no abatement work was observed this past quarter. Pre-demolition work, building material continues. Building material characterization is ongoing, and this is used to determine where the demolition debris goes. And one thing of particular interest has been PCBs, and to date they have not found any regulated levels of federally regulated levels of PCBs in any of the building materials. Next slide, please. Future work. We are going to continue the work we've been doing with NorthStar. Continue reviews of work plans, permits, disposal documents, sample results, corrective action plans, site remediation, and anything else that's being submitted by Haley and Aldrich and NorthStar. Our technical support contractor will continue to be used as for split sampling of soil and groundwater, and then reviews of submittals by Haley and Aldrich. And we'll continue with site visits and our biweekly teleconferences to track progress. And we'll continue to report at the quarterly NDCAP meetings. Our most recent site visit was, as Corey said, was on December 1st. And it's, I have to say, it's always been interesting to go there to see what isn't there anymore. And, although my background is still there, which is we did get to go see the control room, which is mostly dark, but there are a couple lights still on. But anyway, that's what I have to report for this evening, and move on to the next person. And I'm happy to answer questions when they're when that gets opened up.
Okay.
Thank you, Gerald. I'm just following along my phone here. And so, yep, next we'll turn to, next item on the agenda is the Department of Public Service report.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Guzman. I'm special counsel with the Public Advocacy Division of the Department of Public Service. I'm here to provide a brief update on the department's oversight of the Vermont Yankee plant decommissioning. Also joining me on the call are consultants from 4 Points Group, Nicholas Kapik and Mark Gamir. Next slide, please, Tony. So just as a quick review for any new members of the public that may be joining tonight, I'm just providing a general overview of the department's role, which is twofold here. On the financial side, the department reviews the overall financial performance of the decommissioning project. We also review the financial health of NorthStar and assess the viability of the financial assurances contained with the memorandum of understanding between NorthStar and the state agencies. To conduct that review, the department receives detailed monthly and annual financial reporting from NorthStar pursuant to the MOU. On the technical side, the department also reviews the performance of the project to confirm that work performed by NorthStar is consistent with the Site Restoration Trust and Nuclear Decommissioning Trust withdrawals. We also look to identify any risks or concerns that may present a challenge to the successful and timely completion of the project. The department's activities generally consist of reviewing monthly summaries of expenditures that NorthStar provides to us directly at the beginning of each month. We review disbursement requests for the Site Restoration Trust, participate in monthly meetings with NorthStar and separately the Agency of Natural Resources to address any questions or concerns from that month's reporting. And the department's consultants also conduct regular site visits to verify the work that's been completed. Next slide, please. So the department's consultant conducted a site visit in late October where observations were made with the work activities in the turbine building, refueling floor, rad waste building. The conditions observed during that site visit were consistent with the project progress reported by NorthStar in their August and September status reports. Additionally, based on the last approved schedule for the project provided by NorthStar and the annual financial reporting provided to the department, the department finds that the estimated work completed to be reasonable and appears to be NorthStar appears to be on course to complete decommissioning with the available funding. And just as a note here, back in November of 2020, NGS WCS Group Holdings requested that the Public Utility Commission approve a transaction where NGS WCS would acquire 100% of the voting interests in NorthStar Group Holdings LLC. Just as a reminder, NorthStar Group Holdings LLC maintains direct control of the CPG holders for the project decommissioning. As a result of the department's review of that transaction, as well as a secondary recapitalization transaction that occurred at the time of the petitioner's filing, the department ultimately recommended that the petitioner provide additional annual and quarterly financial reporting specifically related to that NGS WCS Group Holdings entity. That petition has, the petitioner has filed to withdraw that approval because the voting interests are not being shifted. However, the petitioner and NorthStar have consented to providing that funding requested by the department as a condition of withdrawal. And so we're currently awaiting an order by the commission on that issue. If you'd like to review those filings, those can be accessed at the EPUC portal with the case number 23458. Next slide, please, Tony. This is a summary of the disbursements from both trust funds from September to the present date since our last meeting. As of November 30th of this year, the Nuclear Decommissioning Trust balance sits at roughly $282.5 million. And then as of the same time, the SRT balance is roughly $57.3 million. And these disbursements are for work that has already been completed. Next slide, please, Tony. And then here's just a short list of the trust balances since September. The entire history of these balances are publicly available on the NDCAP website. Like I've said, these just encompass the balances since the last meeting. And in addition, to play some context with this information, I've provided a summary here, specifically for the license termination activities, spent fuel management, and site restoration costs. Without reading the whole thing, just generally the license termination activities total costs sit at about $536.2 million. And as of November 30th, 262 has been earned by NorthStar, with 274.2 remaining to complete license termination activity work. And as you can see, the trust balance is sitting at $282.5 million. The spent fuel management cost has a total of $290.9 million. NorthStar has earned $22.4 million as of November. 268.5 is required to manage spent fuel until it's removed from the site. And NorthStar anticipates collecting an additional $288.7 million through cost recovery from the Department of Energy for breach of standard contract. And the site restoration costs total at $25 million. As of November of this year, NorthStar has earned $11.3 million for site restoration, leaving about $13.7 million to complete the work. And the site restoration trust is at 57.4. So hopefully that provides a little context for all these numbers. And that is all I have on the department's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Bill Irwin was in the meeting too. Bill, there isn't an official presentation posted to the meeting website, but just in case you have anything to update or offer, now's the time. Otherwise, we can move to panel Q&A.
Well, thanks, Emily. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you okay. A little quiet.
All right, thanks. I just wanted to note that I went with the Department of Environmental Conservation last week for an inspection of Vermont Yankee. We appreciate the tour that was provided to us by NorthStar, and also appreciated to see the work, the progress, and the safe and even healthy conditions there. And we continue to monitor through the bi-weekly meetings that we have with DEC and NorthStar, as well as through a variety of other information that's shared with us over the course of the year. And that would be the report from the Department of Health. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. So at this point, then we'll move on to panel Q&A of the NorthStar or the state agency presentations on decommissioning activities. Yes, Marvin, and then Chris.
This is a question for Corey. I appreciate your presentation. Things went a little too fast for me, so I have to ask these sort of general questions. With regard to the reactor itself, have all the components within the reactor been removed? And are you then next in the process of segmenting the reactor itself?
Yes, Marvin, that's an accurate characterization. All the internal components have been removed. We're just doing the final cleanup and decontamination. So while we drain down, we will have access to allow cutting of the reactor vessel itself into segments. It'll actually be into rings. You just think about taking little slices off of it on the way down.
Then just as a follow-up question, you mentioned that you have all these filters. I assume that the water within that reactor and within the fuel pool is somewhat contaminated. And is that what the purpose of all those filters are, to remove the contamination before you release that water to the river? Well,
A couple things to clarify there. One, we don't put any of the liquid effluent to the river. We don't release anything. But more importantly, the water's actually not very contaminated as far as contaminated liquids go. It's mostly the turbidity and the clarity of the water that allows us to work in the water that we're cleaning up. But yes, we are cleaning up some of the materials that were generated from the cutting operations, and some of those are small particles, metal that is activated, so that is getting cleaned up as well, and those filters will be packaged and shipped to Texas accordingly also.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll turn to Chris.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, it's, as we were getting these reports, you know, as we've talked about like the future of the panel and what the panel does, you know, in the early years of the nuclear decommissioning panel, so much of what we were focused on was, what do we do if things go sideways once the decommissioning starts? And, you know, what if the characterization of the site is off? How do we make sure that, you know, that everybody is, you know, that we have sufficient resources to address the issues, who's going to be, you know, held responsible in terms of paying for it and all that good stuff. And now that we're getting pretty deep into the decommissioning and, you know, getting into the site restoration, just as a longtime panel member, boring is really good. The longer we keep going without finding anything unexpected, because that was always my big concern. And I know we're not nearly done yet, but just wanted to offer this perspective. You know, even on non-radiological, you know, the concern was, well, what if they find things that they didn't expect to find, which might then run up the costs. Same thing with radioactive. You know, what if they find plumes of water, other things they didn't expect to find, and it drives up the cost. So just wanted to say that while I know that these meetings may not always be as stimulating as some might like to see, from my perspective, just a long-time panel member, this is, you know, relief is not the right word. It's just, it's good to see that so far things are progressing as everything was hoped they might go. So again, no, we're not done yet, but yeah, it looks like NorthStar is doing their job, the state's doing their job, and you know, there's good oversight happening, and yeah, I like boring. So.
Thank you, Chris. I would agree with what you said, except I think these meetings are titillating. Any other panelist questions or comments? Otherwise, we'll go into public comments on the presentations. Comments from members of the public. I don't have my computer, so I have to rely on the screen. I don't see any, unless perhaps if there's somebody on the phone, you might just be able to unmute yourself at this point. Otherwise, I'll leave a moment for you to unmute yourself. Otherwise, we'll move into the next item on the agenda, which would be the panel annual report. This is you, Tony, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so there do not appear to be public comments. Yeah, I just want to add that the panel is required to produce a public report, an annual report that is due on January 15. I am putting together that report. I had hoped that I would have a full draft complete right now, but because of some of the other things I've been working on for the panel and some of my other duties, it's not quite as far along as I would like. However, I'm making good progress, and I expect to have a draft ready for Christmas, which will be made available to the panel for individual comments. So I would ask that once the report is available, that members of the panel get comments back to me And we target getting the report issued by its January 15 due date. The report, very much like in previous years, it is a summary of what has occurred at panel meetings. The wrinkle this year is with the Nuclear Waste Policy Committee meeting monthly. There will be some reporting on that. My plan for that is to simply reference the draft report that the committee has put out, because that's a very good compilation, and I don't see any reason to reinvent the wheel on this. So much like previous years, the report will have summaries of individual meetings and a summary of what has been happening at the plant as well. With that, if there are any questions, you can certainly look at the previous reports to get a picture of what this year's report will look like.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. And just as so your point of clarification, you're going to send us the draft report before Christmas.
Right.
We're going to add any changes or edits or comments to you.
Correct.
Promptly, and only you, so that we don't violate open meeting law. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So this is not a reply all situation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you for that reminder. That's something I should put in my summary.
That's quite all right. Okay. Thank you. Any panel questions on that? Oh yeah, Sarah, go ahead.
Hi, so thanks. So it's a process question that I have about the report. Because normally I totally understand why, understand there's a lot going on, but usually this December meeting is timed so that we look at that report, give comments, and have an opportunity to hear each other's comments and then to approve the report. I can certainly make comments on the report, but how are we, the mechanics and logistics of it? I think it is important that the full panel vote on the report. It does go to the governor and the legislature. So do we hold another special meeting? Do we do it electronically? Those are my questions.
Yeah, good questions. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, due to open meeting law, I don't think we can do it electronically. So I guess then we're supposed to have it in by January. Now, sometime in January. And then the other question for the panel, I guess, is, and Emily, maybe you have thoughts on this, is do we want to actually present to a committee, which also gets to the question, does any committee want to hear from us? It may be worth just having a very highly focused meeting in January just to dispose of this item. And Sarah, would it be possible for you to check? I'm not trying to take this away from you, Madam Chair, just trying to help. Would it be possible for you, Sarah, or I know Laura's not here, or June, to kind of see if, would it be House Energy and Senate Natural Resources that would want to hear from us?
I know that those I'm sure the commissioner can answer that too, but the answer is yes, because Representative Sibilia and Senator McDonald are members of this panel specifically because they represent the committees of jurisdiction. So I think that's right. Those would be the committees that would want to hear. I believe those are the committees who received the report, as well as it going to the entire Vermont Assembly has access to the report, but I believe it's sent specifically there, and that's where testimony on this would take place.
So Emily, just to help, in the past, sometimes when I was briefly chair, or when Kate was chair, they would reach out to those committees of jurisdiction just to see, hey, do you want to hear from us? But also, I would say if you want somebody else who has a direct line to these folk or something to ask, that's good too. But
okay,
whatever your preference is.
Okay, and for just in terms of panel's process, then to get it approved,
it seems like, can we have a special focus meeting in January? Does that seem doable and feasible for everyone?
Yeah, I kind of think we have to.
Lisa, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I no longer seem to have the raise hand function because I had to reconnect after the power went out at my house. But yeah, I do think that it's an important consideration in terms of our public outreach mandate that we've been discussing tonight. This is a very important part of it, the annual report. So I do think it merits potentially having a meeting just devoted to approving that. And I will say, as someone who also participated in going up to visit our representatives in Montpelier with Chris a few years ago, and I forget his name, the guy who used to represent the IBEW at the plant. It was great to talk to legislators and answer. They were very interested, and I think that we should really plan that to do that.
Thanks, Lisa.
Emily? I don't want to jump over Sarah, but I did want to speak to a couple points.
I think that that's a stale hand. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm just going to grab the microphone. I think we need a special meeting to get this done. I'm surprised that we don't have a draft tonight, and I'm going to look into why we don't have a draft tonight. But I'm afraid we do need to have a meeting, and I don't want to say we have to have one by law, but I don't see how we can simply individually send comments to Tony and nobody knows who's saying what to this report. It's important to me to see the report in its entirety before I assent to it being the representative work of this panel. And Tony, do we have a January 15 deadline, did you say?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, so this is a very unfortunate position that we're in, but I think we need a special meeting for this.
Yes.
Thank you. I agree that yes, if it does need to be panel approved, then yeah, we should deliberate on it. We have to. So I'd like to propose January 10th for that special meeting. Does that not work for anyone?
Since I don't have a calendar in front of me, what day of the week is that?
That's Monday, okay. Monday, January 10th.
That works for me.
Works for Bill Irwin.
Oh, me is June Tierney. Sorry.
Yeah.
That works for Trish Copolino with A&R.
Thank you, Trish. Looks for Chris. How
Sarah,
about,
that works for me.
okay. Josh, Corey, and David, how does that sound for you guys? I see
Works for us.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
please.
All right, and I saw the note, Chris, about maybe offering the WRC conference room for that meeting, so thank you. That might be very helpful. So
just a question on timing. Is this a meeting that we could do in the afternoon rather than something in the evening? What are people's thoughts on that?
I kind of
This is going to be an evening meeting. This is going to be done at the convenience of the NDCAP panel.
Okay.
And we are going to clear our decks to make it happen.
Yeah. Yep, I was just assuming that this was at the 6 p.m. start time. And we can have it be very focused to approve the annual report.
Okay.
Sarah, did you have anything else to add? Or is that still in? That's okay. Okay, great. So Tony, then you still think that you'll be able to get us the report by Christmas though? And then we'll have a special meeting on January 10th, and then that will be submitted by January 15th.
Emily, I'm sorry, I missed the part where Tony told us the date he's going to get the report to the panel. What is that date, Tony?
We can make that the 21st.
Let's say the 21st, and then you and I and Bill are going to sit down and talk about what we need to do to clear your schedule to get it done sooner.
Okay.
So at the outside, you'll have it by the 21st.
Okay, great. I think that's all for this. Is everyone clear on the process moving forward? If not, then I think we can transition to the next item on the agenda, which would be the election of panel officers. And before I do, just want to acknowledge and thank everyone for sticking through a long meeting, and for all the folks who are putting together those presentations. It does take a long time. So thank you, everyone. And this is an important bit of panel business. And I believe at this point, June, you would preside over these meetings. Is that correct?
You know, oddly, we have precedent. So that is the precedent, and I'm happy to take that over. I think that is probably the most comfortable way for us to proceed.
Thank you.
Emily, I wonder if you could help me first by telling me at this point who we have by way of membership that is present to vote now.
Right now, present to vote, we have Chris Campany.
Hold on a second. I can help you with this too.
Chris Campany, Sarah Coffey, Trish Coppolino, Corey Daniels, Emily Davis, Bill Irwin, Brett Long, David Pearson, yourself, Josh Unruh, and Lissa Weinman.
Okay, thank you.
And I think it looks like Brett has dropped off the meeting.
Okay.
Because I'm not seeing him in the participants list right now.
Okay. So let me just tally this up then. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I think we still have a quorum. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what my notes
are. Okay, very good. So first step is, do we have nominations? Now, Emily, I believe you've expressed an interest in continuing to serve. Nod or shake your head. Okay, very good.
Yes.
And I'm happy to put you forward as a candidate, and I don't think you require an explanation. You've done an outstanding job this year, in my judgment at least. Are there other nominations we'd like to put forward for this position?
We'd just like to clarify that this is for chair and not vice chair. Okay.
It is for chair.
Thank you.
Anyone? Anyone? Sarah, not jumping at this?
Yeah, I move that nominations be closed.
Second the nomination of Emily.
Excellent, Lissa. Thank you. So do we have other nominations? Anyone? This may be the quickest election in history. Okay, we have a second for the nomination. I think what I have to do next is close the opportunity for accepting nominations. So do I have a second to Sarah Coffey's motion to close the nominations?
Second.
Is it for all officers? I'm sorry, or just?
This is for chair right now.
For chair.
This is for chair.
Thank you.
Because as soon as we have a chair, we will proceed with the rest of this. So, okay, we had a second. That's great. Okay. Did we want to have any discussion on the, let me see. We now have a nomination. We have but one candidate. Is there any interest in further discussion about Emily's excellence in the position? I see no takers on that point. In that case, why don't we move to a vote? Do I have a second for that?
Second.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Okay. I'm now going to go through the list of folks who are entitled to vote and ask you to simply signify yes or no, beginning with Chris Campany.
Yes.
Sarah Coffey,
Yes.
Trish forgive me, Trish, I'm mangling your last name. Capolino, isn't it?
Yes, Capolino. Yes.
Very okay. Then I'm very sorry. Santa is watching me. I know. Corey Daniels.
Yes.
Okay. Bill Irwin.
Yes.
Excellent. Brett Long, here's your chance, but we think you've dropped off. Hearing nothing from Brett, we move on. David Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you, David. Myself, I vote yes. Josh Unruh.
Yes.
And Lissa, Lissa.
Yes, yes, yes.
Very good. Okay, great. So, Emily, you get to vote. Would you like to vote for yourself?
Excuse me, point of order.
Yes.
I think you skipped Marvin Resnikoff.
Forgive me,
yes.
Marvin. Marvin, I'm so very sorry. Is there any rectification of the process you would like us to entertain?
I vote yes.
Excellent. Okay, Marvin. Thank you. With that, congratulations, Emily. You have a unanimous endorsement of a second term. You are elected the chair of the NDCAP. And frankly, I'm now going to hand the microphone back to you and have you conduct the vote on the remaining vacancies that there may be.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Commissioner June.
May I say one more thing before you go any farther?
Please.
I think I speak for the panel in commending you for all you've done this year. And I think the unanimity of the vote speaks to the point that we have enjoyed your leadership and we look forward to another year of that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. That means a lot. Again, it is an honor. A public service is near and dear to me, so I'm happy to continue to be involved in this capacity. And you're all very wonderful to work with. And I'm also very open to feedback. And I am a WRC alum. Yes, indeed. So moving right along, I would now like to entertain a motion to open the nominations period for vice chair. And would like to hear a second.
I nominate Josh Unruh for vice chair.
Thank you. Nominate Josh.
I would second that. That's Sarah.
Nomination seconded. Thank you. Any other nominations?
If memory serves, Lissa, you are right now our chair, is that correct? Our vice chair, forgive me. Oh, forgive me. Am I one election behind? Is our present vice chair, Josh?
Has been vice chair this year, June.
Josh, the next time you see me, you can kick me in the shins. Okay, that'll be fair, and I won't kick back. But in that case, I'm going to be quiet now.
It's that lost year phenomenon. Don't worry.
Gotcha.
Any other nominations? Hearing none, then should we close the nomination period for vice chair?
So moved.
And seconded?
Seconded.
Okay, then I think we're ready for a vote, panel. We'll start from the top. This is voting for Josh for vice chair. Chris Campany?
Aye.
Sarah Coffey?
Yes.
Trish Capolino?
Yes.
Corey Daniels?
Yes.
Emily Davis? Yes. Bill Irwin?
Yes.
David Pearson?
Yes.
Marvin Resnikoff?
Yes.
June Tierney?
Don't want the suspense to kill you. Yes.
And Melissa Weinman?
Yes.
And Josh, I don't know if you want to vote for yourself, but I think even if you didn't, it wouldn't matter.
I'd love to vote for myself, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then Josh Unruh. that's a yes vote. Great, then we have another unanimous vote for our Vice Chair, Josh Unruh. Apologize. It's been a long day. Okay. That was very speedy, panel. Yes, June, would you like to add something?
Yes, I'd also like to extend my thanks to Josh, and I think I speak for the panel in saying thank you for your service, Josh, and we're very much looking forward to your tenure in the coming year as well. Really, really appreciate that the two of you are hanging in there with these leadership roles.
Yes, and I would also like to thank Josh for entertaining my many questions and getting me up to speed and queuing me up for chair, so it made the work a lot easier. So thank you, Josh, for being willing to be in this position again. And with that, I think we've covered most of our business, so we're ready to transition to the general public comment period for the panel. So members of the public, if anyone would like to add anything or provide comment. And seeing none, then I think we can move along to meeting wrap up. Importantly, this should also be scheduling out the next year's meetings. I believe we typically do that in this last meeting of the year. So or do we all agree that that's something that we want to do right now? Just have it in the books. I'm seeing some nods. Okay, great. So panel, we already know that we have January 10th. I'm guessing that we'll want to keep the focus on not actually doing more substantive business than we have to beyond just approving the annual report. So then we should still plan on scheduling out for 2 thumbs up. Thank you, Chris. So we should still plan on scheduling out 4 other meetings for the rest of 2022. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, I'll point out that with the most recent changes to the panel in last year's legislation, there's a requirement for only 3 meetings a year now. That was one of the things. I just point that out.
Thank you. Oh, that's right. not saying anything. Panelists, what do you think? Thoughts about that? Would you like to maintain 4 meetings a year or go down to statutory minimum? Any thoughts? I see the comment, Chris. 3, 4 if necessary. Sarah, you came off mute for a second. Is that what you were going to suggest?
I was going to suggest, and as we've done in the past, there are times of year when it makes sense for us to have a meeting. One in like moving backwards, one in December, one in September, and then typically another one is in the spring, sometime April or May.
I think that needed to be the first week of May, right?
Yeah.
We typically do May to give the state the time to process the NorthStar reports.
Right.
Right. That's right. I would just request that it not be the first Monday of a month. I have a regular conflict on that. So if it could be the second Monday, or I know that Mondays has been a night that this panel has met. So that's why I'm saying Monday. Maybe it's another evening, but if we stick with Mondays, I would like to request that we not make it the first Monday of the month.
I think that'd be great. I understand that that's also, Laura Sibilia has a conflict on the first Mondays. So that works for 2 of you. Yeah, Chris?
Yeah, I'd suggest we can meet it. Obviously, we're meeting in January, but suggest we can meet in May and then convene in September, not early September, but after school is back in session. That way we avoid August vacations and such. And then December to deal with the annual report. That's just a suggestion.
So December to deal. So I'm sorry, Chris, were you suggesting to skip the May meeting? No, the May meeting would be May, September. I consider that our big meeting when we get the report. And then to my mind too, that also drives, are there any surprises there?
and then have a meeting in September, just trying to avoid the summer vacations, and then December to deal with the annual report.
Got it. Thank you.
That's just one person's opinion.
It seems like there's a consensus building around that. So how about, panel, we could plan on Monday, May 9th, which is the second Monday of the month, and then September 19th, which is the third Monday of that month. And I think Laura also has a conflict on 1st and 3rd, so we might shift that to 26th unless that doesn't work for folks. And then again on Monday, December 19th for the 2022 meetings.
How about December 12th? The 19th just feels awfully close to the holidays.
That does, yeah, that's right. Today is only the 6th. Thank you. The 12th or the 5th, any preference? We could keep it earlier.
Not the 5th.
Oh, sorry, not the 5th, because it's the 1st. It's time to meet.
I know, all these needs.
Okay, December 12th.
So, I'm sorry, again, I can't raise my hand. I'm a guest now. But so does that mean that we can't have any kind of input to the DOE process that they've asked for March 4th? Because we were talking about maybe having a meeting before that so that we could approve some input there as a panel.
Yeah.
Which would be then Monday, February 28th. Would be the last opportunity to do that if we wanted to weigh in.
As this plan stands, that's right. Unless we did want to squeeze this item into the January 10th meeting. But I am guessing that panelists would not find that desirable because it is a substantive issue, and probably would take up a lot of airtime.
It might not. If our committee's in agreement with the language, it might not. The work would go on in committee.
Will your committee, Lissa, be able to meet between now and January 10th?
We are scheduled to meet in December. I forget the date.
20th.
When is it, Tony?
December 20th.
December 20th, we're scheduled to meet. I mean, we could try, and if it didn't work out, then we could just let it go. I mean, we could put a time limit on it. If there was agreement and a quick vote, we could do it, and if not, we wouldn't.
Yep, June?
This has the feel to me of being something significant and therefore worthy of the panel's time and attention. I am not clear as to whether this March date is the only possible date for commenting. I just don't know. But if that is the case, go ahead, Lissa.
I think that's my understanding. I mean, obviously, it's not a fast-moving issue necessarily, but that is the date that the Department of Energy has put out as the close of comment period.
Yeah, so what I can offer is this. I've got Mr. Porter on the line tonight. I think Mr. Guzman may still be with us, but I'm not sure. And
I am here.
Thank you, Eric. If we can look into this and find out whether that March 4 date, Lisa, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Whether that is in fact the drop dead date for comments of this type. And I would recommend that we provisionally, Chris, you had a great schedule worked out, but that we provisionally have a date set aside sometime before March for panel deliberations if we in fact want to do comments. But I don't think it's wise for us to rush that or to assume that We're going to review the committee's very good work and just very quickly vote on it. This is the guts of what we do, and we need to give it the respect it's due. So Eric, if you could look into that and find out what the limitations of the process are, we will then let Emily know what the resolution is, and Lissa, you as well. And then we'll take plans from there. But my recommendation would be to provisionally pencil in a date sometime before March 4 to deal with this.
So, Lissa, you offered
February 28th.
But that was sort of the last. If we did have comments, you'd want to have a little bit of time maybe to rework whatever your recommendation or whatever the opinion would be, I'm guessing. So maybe.
I don't think that wouldn't really work, would it? Because, you know, we have to come to an agreement on an advisory opinion. You know, I actually don't know. I'm asking. So maybe this isn't an advisory opinion. This is just a comment to DOE. Does it fall outside of an advisory opinion? I don't think so. I think it could be construed as an advisory opinion, which would mean that whatever language has to be approved in that meeting, it can't be amended consequently.
I think we would, my guess is that we would defer to the work product of your committee to see what would be the best way to go forward with this. If you think that this is worthwhile to submit to the DOE for public comment for this RFI, then I think that this panel would be interested in knowing that. Or if you thought it was an advisory opinion that should go to other channels, okay. I think we would. So I think it's, I would say it might be up to you, but I would also be curious to hear what other panelists think about the process.
Chris, were you going to speak to this issue?
I'm torn just because I feel like I've been down this road before with 2016. I'd almost suggest Lissa's committee to kind of look at that prior report that they issued from the last time around and say, these are things that are appealing, these are things that are not, and they could bring that back to us. And I forget exactly what our procedure is, but members can always call a meeting of NDCAP. And so, as not to put pressure on her, but just to kind of see how the process goes. And then if you feel like there's something you want to bring to the panel, bring it to us. And we can always have a special meeting just about that, just like we had talked about having one just for the annual report. So that would be my suggestion. It's hard for me to get. I guess I'm just getting older. We talked about this climate council, right? Kind of the zenith of our career. Some of us worked on this stuff for a long time. So climate, I feel I've been working on climate since '91. Been, consent-based siting, not that long, but it just feels like, it's, we're playing the same record again. So I will try to be more optimistic. But I would say, this isn't putting pressure on you, Lisa. I would just say, if the subcommittee comes up with a strong recommendation that you feel warrants a meeting, let's call a meeting.
Mm-hmm. I guess I would prefer that we pencil in the 28th as a date that we, have on the record, and then we would confirm that sometime in January, whether that looks like it's going to happen.
Sure.
But
could
then
we make the 27th, Lissa, because the 28th is a Tuesday, I believe.
Oh, it was Monday the 27th.
Yeah, I agree. That's to say, I agree. I think it'd be always easier to pencil it in now and then delete it from our calendars if we don't need the meeting.
Wait a second.
I think actually that in 2022 it is Monday the 28th.
Yes, it is. I'm seeing.
Oh, I'm skipping ahead to 23. I'm ahead of myself.
Oh wait, Connie and I have a history of giving false dates, so we're just trying to keep each other straight.
No, Monday.
I'm keeping you on your toes. That's
right.
Sarah's blowing right past Omicron and looking at Zeta. So
yeah.
That's all right, Sarah. I forgot a year a moment ago. So
We're all on the same
karma of the world is restored. Emily, if it's all right with you, I just wanted to speak to this issue about advisory versus comment versus whatever,
Yes.
and say that if the NDCAP is going to state something, whether it is an advisory opinion or a plain comment or whatever the nature of the beast is, that is an act of the panel.
Yes.
And the panel needs to take issue on it. And I do not see the subcommittee as empowered to file things on its own behalf. Now, if the members of the subcommittee wanted to get together as private citizens and file something, I think they're well within their rights to do that. But there is no such thing as the subcommittee having the authority to act in any capacity outside of the NDCAP. And so I don't think it matters so much whether we're talking about advisory opinions or comments. It matters more whether it's an official act one way or another of the NDCAP or not. And I just wanted to offer that to you, Lissa, as an alternative should it develop that, in your estimation, the product isn't ready enough to clear the hurdles of our NDCAP process to constitute an official position of the NDCAP. It doesn't mean that you as an individual or like-minded folks lose your opportunity as citizens to comment at the DOE.
That's definitely fully understood, which is why I said we couldn't, move forward unless the whole panel, when we would meet and discuss it. But we do have a meeting on the book for December 20th as a committee. We will take this up very clearly to decide how to proceed and inform the panel as we move forward. But I think that based on the last committee meeting, we are pretty much in step in terms of our feeling about the consent-based citing, and we can delve into that a little more deeply and hopefully have something so that the NDCAP would have a presence in that call for information. So
right, and to the point, if the filing date is March 4, I agree with Emily that a February 28 meeting is a little late for the panel to have a meaningful opportunity to weigh in on the subcommittee's product. So I think that meeting needs to be before Feb 28, unless I missed the part where we found a date that we all like. So
no, well, that's President's Weekend is the previous weekend. So it would have to be, I guess, around the 14th then. What a better way to spend Valentine's Day, folks. No. We love NDCAP.
I'll trade you my sitting on the Climate Council for a couple meetings, and I'm sure Chris would take that offer too, right, Chris? You would sit on the subject.
No, the joy that brings me. No, I can't miss that.
I would personally feel compelled to share the wealth. So listen, if you'd like to sit in on my behalf on the Climate Council and I'll sit in on the subcommittee, that's a fair trade, I think. I'm just kidding, folks. It's late.
I do think that, whatever we would bring to the full committee, we would have vetted pretty well ahead of time. So I guess I feel a little more comfortable with the 28th in that regard. If it was something that we couldn't agree on, then perhaps we just don't submit comment at that point.
I think my point is that as much as I respect that the subcommittee may be comfortable, I'm not on that subcommittee, and I'm going to be taking a fresh look at it.
Okay. Well, you want to say the 7th of February then? Is it the 7th? It has to be a Monday. We could just pencil it in. Again, this is not anything. It's a month after that other special meeting.
How about let's tentatively hold the 28th as a provisional date. Lissa, if you think the committee can get the panel materials maybe 2 weeks ahead of time, so it's time for us to digest it, I think it will be a fast turnaround. It might be too fast, but hopefully we can have some time to deliberate, and we'll trust that the committee did its homework. Maybe if that feels like, I do want to, I think it's important to hear from Eric Guzman and other folks looking at this to see if March 4th is a hard and fast date.
If it's not, then I think we can look at it, but maybe hold that date for now. And then in the upcoming weeks, we can solidify that. Does that seem okay? Chris, did you added something into the chat?
The old.
I'm putting in there the 25th from the last time around.
Okay.
Public comments from 2015, and now I'm going to drop in there the draft report from January 12th, 2017.
Right.
Which I think was, probably right before the 2017 inaugural. So if folk want to see what was reported before, what happened before, it might be a quick, easy review just to kind of know where we were headed last time. By we, I mean the nation.
Yes.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks.
So does that plan seem okay, Lisa?
Yes, I think so.
Then, just to recap, special meeting on Monday, January 10th, tentative meeting, provisional meeting on Monday, February 28th. And then we have our big meeting on Monday, May 9th. Once again on Monday, September 19th. And then our last meeting of the year on Monday, December 12th, 2022.
Okay.
Any conflicts that make that not workable that we should know of right now? Otherwise, I think we have our next year's meetings. Great. Then, unless there's anything else, I think we've concluded all of our business, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Meeting is officially adjourned at 9:08 p.m., 2 minutes ahead of schedule. Thank you all so much for your diligence and attention to this meeting, and for, I know these meetings are not short and easy, but I appreciate your attention.
Emily, I just saw Eric had his hand up before we adjourned.
No,
it's okay. Eric,
yeah.
What was your?
I just Nick just sent me the information as far as the comments on the interim siting from DOE, and it is March 4th by 5 p.m. And I'm just going to post the link here in the chat.
Okay, so that's a drop dead date.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Emily. I just did violence to our process.
I apologize, Eric. I didn't see your hand.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, but thank you for that information. That's very helpful and good to know.
And could we just, one more thing to ask Tony to post those links that Chris just sent on the NDCAP website under the Federal Nuclear Waste Policy Committee, or wherever but it would be good to have that on the website. It might already be there, but buried. So.
Yeah, I don't think I've had a chance to put those up, but yeah, my plan was to put this under meeting materials for tonight's meeting, since it was discussed. And it does make sense to put this on the waste policy page as well. So I don't see any reason to not have it there more than once. So.
Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Tony. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Hey.
Have a good day.
Good night.
Bye-bye.